So for those of you who don't know, I'm Catherine Haskins. I'm one of the co-founders, and she is to my right, but she may be somewhere else for you. That is Brenda Andreessen. She is a rock star within the profession, and I'm very, very fortunate to have her as my partner in this endeavor. So the Bridge Club is the first and only video-based community that's only within the veterinary profession. And our goal is to bring conversations forward that are important. And tonight happens to be one of those conversations. We're going to be talking about fear-free. Right now, you should all be unmuted. You can mute yourself if you would like. If there's a sound coming from behind, please feel free to do so. But jump in, ask the questions. We do have pauses built in. This is not a webinar. If you called a webinar, we're going to force you to put money in the drink jar, and then that'll go help fund. We think we've been called in enough. We actually think we can start scholarships for that. So that would be fantastic. So that we can actually send some people to college.
Send our own children to college first. That might be good.
Let's send our own. Yeah, if you and I could actually make a dime, that'd be fantastic.
Exactly.
So let's jump in. This is a really important conversation. We have two amazing guests tonight as our hosts. We have Dr. Jennifer Merlot and Dr. Brian Bourquin. All of a sudden I got very like French because of my shirt. I felt like I was like, we were talking, every time I see your name, I keep thinking it's a wine, like a Burgundy or something. I don't know why. Anyway, both of them are amazing practitioners who have taken the journey through fear-free. And so we are going to kick off our conversation. We have lots of questions that we are going to be asking throughout the evening, but jump in. But Brian is going to tell us a little bit about himself and then jump in with our toast. And then we will have Jennifer do the same and tell us a little bit about her practice. So Brian, I'm going to turn it on over to you.
Hello, my name is Dr. Brian Bourquin. I own Boston Veterinary Clinic, which is obviously in Boston. We actually have two clinics with the hopes of opening the third one in January. And we have been, I'm a Cornell grad from 2001, moved here straight from Cornell, never left. I like it. I am the dog daddy of a Brussels Griffon and a Boston Terrier and a cranky old ragdoll. And my husband and I live in the south end of Boston. And we've been fear-free since 2018 as accredited practice, as well as my entire staff is fear-free accredited.
Okay, so toast.
Ready for the toast. So, according to Eleanor Roosevelt, do one thing a day that scares us. I would just add, let's not be fear-free.
There you go. Yeah. Or let's be for no, let's not.
No. Here it is to being fear-free. Oh, I screwed it up. I haven't even drank any yet. Here's to being fear-free.
Good job.
Or not fearful.
One too many rosés before the toast can do you in.
Oh my gosh.
My first sip.
So Jennifer, tell us about your practice, where you're at, etc.
Sure. I am Jennifer Merlot. I live in Rock Hill, South Carolina, which is just outside of Charlotte. I opened Chestnut Arbor Veterinary Hospital in 2017. We opened with the intention of being fear-free, so all my staff was fear-free right from the beginning, and we became accredited as a fear-free practice in 2018. We were the first one in the entire state of North Carolina, so we were very proud of that. And kind of like Brian, just like the jumped full force into fear-free and haven't looked back.
That is absolutely awesome. Okay, so you jumped in. Feet first into fear-free. Let's first start why. Why did you do it? So it's been, giving credit where credit is due. This has been a vision of Dr. Marty Becker, and this is a definite movement within the profession. But Jennifer, why don't you talk to us first about why you actually did it? What was the driving factor for you?
For me, I had sort of gotten to that point in my career where I had lost some of the passion for what I went to vet school for. It certainly wasn't what I had envisioned when I left school 15 years ago. It kind of changed somewhere along the way. And I got tired of sort of the way things were going. I didn't want to see pets held down and restrained and miserable and not wanting to come to the vet's office. I think becoming a parent myself, I would never allow someone to take my daughter away from me to the back of a hospital to do procedures. And so it really resonated with me when Dr. Becker started this movement. I figured there had to be a better way to treat our patients and make it so that their pet parents would want to bring them to the vet more often, because we can't treat them if we don't see them. For me, it really reignited my passion in veterinary medicine as a whole.
I think that's fantastic. Brian, what about you? What was the draw for you?
I mean, actually, everything she says resonates. I mean, I just, I knew there had to be a better way. I mean, I have a distinct memory of walking in the back and, seeing like 4 techs rodeoing a poor dog down for a nail trim. And it was a cattle dog, terrified. And it struggled to get away. It actually ripped its own cheek open. And I was just like, stop. I mean, that was the moment for me. I was like, this isn't right. There's got to be a better way. And I left that corporate practice. And as I started on my own journey and opening my own clinic, I didn't have a word for it yet. It wasn't called Fear Free yet. But, I had a cat-only room. We had a separate entrance for reactive dogs. I set a room up like a living room instead of the normal exam room. And we just started doing things, kinder, gentler. And then we learned about fear, anxiety, stress. And we just never looked back. And now it seems archaic the way that we used. And I used to be so proud, like, yeah, I held that dog down. And now, what a rude I was. Like, just it's disgusting. But it's a new day.
So I am curious, one of the reasons that Brenda and I wanted to bring this conversation forward was because both of us, Brenda's husband is a veterinarian and I work with hospitals all across the country. And there is a fear in itself of doing fear-free, the amount of work that it's going to take. And so one of the things that we wanted to do with this conversation was really kind of walk through what some of those challenges could be for practices who are considering them. How did you overcome those and some of the barriers that people might expect? So before, as you guys were thinking both, and I know it's turned out well for both of you, but Brian, let's start with you. What was your biggest fear or concern that you were worried about in order to go through this process?
Well, I think like most vets, I'm maybe just a little bit of an overachiever. So the thought that if we didn't make it, we wouldn't be able to get through it, or that we failed. I mean, we when we had our discussion earlier, we talked about, there are days that don't go well. There's the day where you're like, an hour and a half behind because you took your time and you're like, how is this ever going to make us money? Or, but then you start having some successes. And like everything in life, once you see a little bit of good, you get a little piece of it, you want more. And you realize, for me, the day that I saw my grouchy old technician who was like, we're never going to do fear free, I want to scruff, turn to the new tech and be like, yeah, we don't do that here. I was like, yes, we did it.
So speaking of that, you mentioned a little bit about your staff. Were they all in? Did they have the energy for this, or was there any doubt on getting them sold in?
No, there was. I mean, so I think that most people will say that some self-select out, right? So this is not going to be right for everyone. I mean, there's just a few people who are not going to change their ways. I'm lucky in that it was my practice, so I could do what I want. We're also a new practice. So I don't have anyone there who's been doing it that way for 30 years. That obviously, that's a hardship. If you're not an owner, that's a hardship. Even part of working at my clinic was you had to be fear-free certified. And it just kind of rippled through the staff, and the few that didn't see the good in it, just kind of, they went their own way. But no, and then the clients start seeing it. I mean, today I didn't have a chance to read it, but I had a, Google or Yelp or whatever. And the first thing was like, fear free works. And I was like, oh my God, like, there it is. Like, put that all over Yelp. Stop, yelling about my parking lot being full. So, it was very, very exciting. And most people were excited about that. And then when you go from being just certified to going for practice accreditation, it builds on itself. And so, we're all overachievers in the vet profession.
So what was one of your fears, Jennifer, as you guys were going through, or biggest concern in when you and your staff ended up going through this process?
I think my biggest concern was, would our clients embrace it as much as we had. So being a new practice and starting off as fear-free, it was nice because kind of like Brian said, we didn't have people who were expecting something different than fear-free. But clients in general aren't fully knowledgeable about what fear-free is and what it entails and what that visit's going to look like. And it's up to us to educate them. And we did have our share of clients that pushed back against it. You know, they don't want to take the time. They don't want to come back for additional visits. They don't want to give their pet medication. So for me, that was the hardest thing. And something I still probably struggle with is how to have those conversations. How do you do that? And then how do you get the broad shoulders to just say, all right, well, we're not going to do that. And if that's not what, if you're not on board with what we do here, you can go somewhere else and have it done that way somewhere else. So it took a little while to be okay with saying that, especially as a practice owner, being okay with saying, okay, you can go someplace else. That's fine. So that was about it.
Walk us through the process, Jennifer. So you all, how long does this take? So this isn't like a CE, right? Where you go in, you're 30 minutes and you're like, I'm certified. So what is the process for, I mean, when I say process, I mean like the length of time that it takes to practice?
For the practice, it took us about 6 or 7 months to do everything. So individual certification is different. I've seen people do that in a weekend if they're so inclined to sit down and do it. The certification for the practice, there's certain protocols and operating procedures you have to have in place, kind of like AAHA accreditation or cat-friendly practice. There's a lot of paperwork that goes into it, and usually there's one person who has to do that. And Brian, it was probably you, because it was me in my practice doing all that stuff and typing it out and making sure it worked. So 6 months, it may sound like a long time, but it goes by pretty quick. And again, we had the luxury of being new practices, so we could set it up that way. I think practices that are established, I've known practices that have been established for 15 or 20 years now that are going through the certification process. It's probably going to take them a little bit longer because physically they may have to do things to their clinic to change things around, and then getting staff on board and getting doctors on board. If your doctors are not on board, it makes it a little bit tougher.
So let's come back to the doctors in a minute, but Brian, can you talk me through how long it took your practice? And because you have 2 practices already, you're obviously hoping to do your 3rd. Is there a huge cost implication for, is she saying if you're an established practice, of things you have to change?
So the timing was very similar. I think probably if we compare times, Jennifer and I probably
we probably were at the same time.
credit at the same time. I am not going to take credit for all the paperwork. My practice manager did that, and I will get in trouble if I say that. So I will. Yeah, I mean, it's actually more expensive when everyone's doing their individual certifications, which we paid for. Once you're accredited practice, the price actually comes down a little bit. The major price is actually in Cheese Whiz and peanut butter. Mm-hmm. That's really where all your money goes. Yep. And which I'm very serious. I'm not actually joking about that. Like our food bill for treats is very high, but we just increased all our prices $3, and it's a fear-free surcharge. And it's basically for those treats. So we get it back. But, it isn't automatic. So, I'm going to have to go through fear-free accreditation for the other practices. But once you've done it, and the other thing I think was interesting is I started freaking out like a month before our test or assessment. And I just remember very distinctly calling like, oh my God, we're not ready. Like, and them saying, we wouldn't be coming to your place if you weren't ready. We're here to help you. And that was just so reassuring. And it kind of took the stress down when you're likely going to pass. I'm not saying they don't go through the assessment, but then it became an enjoyable process. And you want to be able to share this with others. So I think the price is well worth it. I mean, it takes about one client to say, I'm never going anywhere else. And you're like, boom, you multiply that out by what that client's worth over, so many years, let alone if they tell a friend and they tell a friend and tell a friend. So, and then, when we're, seeing things about, veterinarian suicide and technician suicide and all that, like, what's that cost? It just, to me, it's a priceless thing, whether you call it fear-free or gentle handling or whatever it is. It's the way we need to go for treating our patients.
So I want to take a quick break here and see if anyone has any other questions as we're jumping in here. Does anyone have any specific questions about Fear Free, or I will continue on? There's two ways you can do it. You can do it through the chat, or you can just unmute yourself and jump on in. I will take that as a thing that you really want Catherine to continue to talk. So,
Hey, I could ask a question, but I figure you'll carry on and we'll catch
no,
up.
no, no, go for it, Brenda, and then I'll ask.
I've always wondered, because I spent a lot of time over my career working with different organizations who are championing Fear Free and putting out literature and supporting programming and things like that. And I always wondered, and I think some of you and you know who are here with us today might have seen a lot of that literature through DVM 360 and Boehringer Ingelheim and some of the other companies. Did that help you feel good about your decision? Did that encourage you to make that? I mean, was that enough information to say, all right, now I feel like I get it? Or was it something else that motivated you? And then the reason I ask this too is not because I'm trying to find out how well those materials did. I'm really wondering what is that information start feeding you with ideas? And should there be more of that? Or is there too much or enough already?
If I could, I guess I would touch on that. I think and Jennifer seems to be kind of nodding the same way. It was more internal. Like we knew something was wrong and I didn't need someone else to point it out. It became cool to have a name for it. I think for those who may be more on the fence or not really sure, probably that's reassurance. But for me, like I was looking for something like, and it happened to come along at the time. I was doing what I was doing anyways. But I think if you were a little bit undecided, yeah, maybe that seeing it around and being like, okay, others are doing that and they didn't close their doors. That's a good sign.
Yeah.
Jennifer, do you want to add to that?
I mean, I agree with what Brian said. I certainly feel like I always practiced in a fear-free sort of way. You know, I always remember doing my exams on the floor. I always hated exam room tables. Like I just always wanted to make the experience pleasant for the pet. So when Fear Free came about, it just sort of resonated internally. I didn't need an article to tell me it was going to work. I, jumped in, started using some of the skills that I learned through the process and saw the changes firsthand, could actually see it working in my day-to-day practice. And so for me, it was a no-brainer. Like when I open my practice, this is how it's going to be. This is what I want to see it be. Because I think in 10 or 15 years, the old way is going to be very obsolete and all the practices are going to be doing it in the fear-free sort of way.
So I think that's really cool. One of the things that you had kind of talked about, Brian, before when we had jumped into this is you said it's constantly evolving because there's things that are in fear-free now that are out of date. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Well, I think we were touching more on some of the pharmacology stuff. Some of the drugs that we were using, so PVPs or pre-veterinary pharmaceuticals, to help get the animals in. And there's what we thought worked, and then you used them. You're like, oh, well, that didn't work so well. And then, I think fear-free and behavior goes kind of close hand in hand. And I do a lot of behavior stuff. And you're like, well, maybe trazodone actually isn't so good for the night before, but Celio and gabapentin are the way to go. And so then you're like, change all your little formulas again. And, and that's kind of the exciting thing for those who don't want the same thing, that each fear-free case is its own little puzzle. And, when you like a Rubik's Cube, and once you get the right thing, I mean, that's the aha moment. And that's when you're sold. Seeing a video of it working is not the same as that dog that you haven't touched in 3 years, who now is like sitting there wagging its tail, half stoned, but wagging its tail, ready to, you're doing blood work without holding off because you're using, the suction catheter. So that kind of stuff just, that's the ever changing. And as more and more of us do it, you're like, oh, marshmallows and cats. Yeah, that didn't work for us, but everyone else freaking loves marshmallow for cats. But, for us, it's the little tempura shrimp thingies. So you share that online and someone says, oh, I like that too. So as more and more people do it, you're getting more and more ideas.
So Jennifer, I do wanted to ask, we're getting close here to the end before we go to the after party. But Jennifer, I did want to ask, was there anything a part of the process that you went through that you were surprised that was a criteria piece because you thought, what impact is that going to have in fear-free? Was there any component because I heard at one point someone made a comment about OSHA. This was not you two, but at one point the OSHA requirements that were needed, or was there anything in the process of the Fear Free that you were like, would have never thought that was going to impact the pet?
For me, no. I saw Brian nodding his head, so I'll be interested to hear what he said. No, I mean, I think I kind of anticipated everything that they were going to want. I think for me, it was interesting to learn so much about my patients and start to view a hospital from their point of view, and you start to pick up on different things. But nothing that they required surprised me. So I'm kind of curious to hear what Brian has to say.
Well, go, Brian.
I think both of ours were recommendations for like absolutes, but one was when we first started talking about cleaning was the not using bleach. Early on, that bleach is evil and takes away a dog's sense of smell for 48 hours. That wasn't out there yet. So I was like, what? I've used bleach since I was like 6. That's what you clean up after dogs with. So that was kind of one thing. And they're really kind of no to bleach, but now I'm like, someone brings a bleach thing in and I'm like, no, it's not allowed in the building. They can't smell for days. And then the other was, I think for so long you brought your ratty old towels and sheets and you donated them to the vet. And now it's like, no, they don't want old towels. They want nice, like fluffy ones and fleeces. And so just kind of like little mind bends that were so ingrained. The old towel goes to the vet. Well, no, they don't want their old towels any more than we do. And nice fleeces. And that was, those were two areas that just kind of made me, and then it made sense.
No, that's pretty good. That's pretty good. So we are at about 3 minutes left. Go ahead, Brenda.
Yeah, that's right. I just want to jump in and say, because one of the things we talked about in our run of show, when we were talking through how we wanted to approach this today, was the fact that it was hard, right? I mean, it was not necessarily easy. And I would like to just ask the people who are here with us today, do you want to hear about some of the difficult parts? Because to me, there's all the great stuff that comes at the end. But oftentimes you don't get to the good stuff at the end until you've sweated it a little bit. So I found it very interesting that there were the times when you're just like, what the heck am I doing? But you push through, and now here you are, and you're so glad you did. So comments there, I think, would be really helpful, to the group, unless the group is just like, yeah, I don't want to know about that. Then you can say that.
I think Brian.
Remember, unmute yourselves. I think all of you are muted except for Valeria. And so I want to make sure that if you guys, this is your community, so please feel free to jump in.
Brian sort of touched on this when we were doing run of show about, those failure cases, or the cases where you're frustrated and you're like, that didn't go as planned, or they didn't read the book when you gave them the meds and nothing happened, and they've been in the room for 45 minutes now, and you're just sort of like, okay, this is not happening today. And you have to just remind yourself that what we're doing is not maybe going to happen that day, but it might in 6 months, or it might in a year. I worked with a patient for a year. He came and saw me every other week. We did sessions so that we could do his annual exam without any fear, without any stress, just so that he would get comfortable with a syringe, with people touching him, with people looking at his eyes and everything. He had a unicorn owner who brought him every other week to do these things and worked with him at home. But it takes that investment in time, and it's hard when you're backed up, when you have lots of stuff going on. If you're used to seeing 10 or 15 minute appointments all day long, it can be frustrating to try to make this change, because it's going to take more than 15 minutes, most cases, to allow them to adjust and accommodate what they need in order to get done what their owners want done that day.
Ooh, which leads me to ask a really controversial question, but I do want to say we are at 7:24, so I'm going to ask the question. So if anyone needs to jump off, please feel free. We totally understand, and we're right at the 7:25 mark. But when you have a practice, and I'm not asking how either one of you incentivize or pay your veterinarians in your practice, but for a practice that is incentive driven, or that is based on production, how is this impacting them in the startup of this? I am curious about that, because I think you're saying you go from what you used to have a 15-minute appointments that now could last longer. What does that do for first of all, overall production? And then if that's what they're, viewing as, and then what does that mean? How does the veterinarian feel if they feel like they've been robbed?
That's actually what I was going to use as my, not fail, but difficulty, which we are still figuring out, is, and a few of my vets do work on production. Overall for me, it works. This is in the black, but we've really been challenged with what do you do with a high FAS patient that is going to eat up at least a half hour. We do half-hour appointments, and we have struggled with putting him on the tech side. Well, the tech can't prescribe drugs, and now if it's on a different doctor's day, I'm maybe not getting credit for that. And so what we've done is a couple things. One, we've zeroed out the price of all our PVPs. So no one doctor is getting all the gabapentin money, and that also helps with the public's way of looking at this. We're not doing this just to get rich. And then the other thing is we often put the highest FES on people's surgery days where you've got the extra. So I will see my highest FAS as my first 2 appointments on my surgery days. So if it takes all day, I don't care. I'll do a surgery in between while it gets drugged. And that's been kind of our solution. That's going to become challenging if you end up having 5 high FASs and you still got to rock out 5 dentals. So that's my ... I don't know where that's going to land. We are working on training techs more in just the FAS, almost like mini surgical techs to be able to accommodate that. But that's our challenge, and we're a 6-doctor practice. So you can't give up a day to the German Shepherd that you can't get in the building. So that's where we're still fine-tuning things.
That's really interesting. Do you have anything you want to add on that one, Jennifer?
No, I mean, I think, again, long-term, if they become better accustomed to coming to the vet's office, they're going to come more often. So the dog that maybe you saw once a year just to give it its vaccines, or once every 3 years to give it a rabies, if they're enjoying coming to the vet's office, their owners are going to bring them more often. So now you're going to see them for the ear infections, the skin stuff, the vomiting that they had previously, the owner had just treated based on what PetSmart told them to do or whoever. They're now going to come in and see us. So in the long run, it may actually bring you in more revenue. It's just going to take time to get there.
That's
They're
interesting.
really good, both really good points. I'm curious to know if anybody who's in our audience has started Fear Free or is really into Fear Free. I mean, are you guys here because you are thinking about it, or because you're already in and want to compare experiences? And if you don't want to say, you can just put it in the post. I'm just really curious.
And if we saw everybody's faces, we could see you raise your hand. I'm just saying as we go
So
forward.
this is Clara. I'm the practice manager of a brand new opening practice. We've been open 3 weeks.
Woohoo!
And
Congratulations.
I know, it's great.
Cheers
We
to that. Good practice. Yeah, that's awesome.
do actually want to become fear-free. So this has all been very interesting to me as far as how you guys have set up, the 2 of you both starting with new practices. And, figuring out how to get it going.
So how many doctors do you have in your practice, Clara?
1.
Just
Okay.
the one? Okay.
And the practice was designed around the fear-free idea.
Oh, so you're already halfway there.
Yeah, exactly. You already have a good advantage up then.
So on that, Clara, if you were to ask them, what is the thing that's going to tip you to want to do it? What do you need to hear from them or see or understand that would be that tipping point?
I don't know if there is any, we're already tipped.
Okay.
It's, how's that? I'm driving and I'm already tipped.
There you go.
That's when my camera's off.
I just want to know what you were in for, I guess, then maybe here, right? You're listening in tonight just to hear the experience and a little bit of the insight from these guys.
Right.
Yeah.
That's kind of what I'm looking for is, how do we really go about this? We've got I haven't put in I haven't signed up online to do the practice certification. One, because we've only been open 3 weeks.
That's brand new, yes.
Yeah. And I'm still trying to figure out what is a priority. Does that make sense?
What a great selling point if you start advertising once you're fear-free. I mean, I would advise that you sign up sooner than later. There was up to a few month lag.
Yeah.
They don't have that many. So I would sign up to get things going. And then, my God, what a great selling point. Not only are we a brand new clinic, but we're a fear-free accredited clinic. And boom,
Right.
lots of people come running in.
So
We already do have fear-free certified individuals, including myself. So we are advertising that fact that we have, fear-free staff.
That's
And-
fantastic.
So
Right now
speaking of promoting it, how is everyone promoting it? I mean, does the consumer understand it?
Yes and no. I think some of them have heard of it. I've had clients come in specifically seeking out fear-free certified practices. So there are people that are in the know about it. We have things all over our lobby that say we're a fear-free certified practice, especially above the scale, because people have to stop at the scale with their dog. So there's a big thing that says what it means to be fear-free and what they can expect from their visit. It's on the website. You put it on every piece of marketing material you send out. Have local newspapers write articles about you and how you're different. All those things to kind of set yourself apart. But I think it's becoming a catchphrase that's heard more and more now. So I think the general public is becoming more aware.
Interesting. Do you do anything unique, Brian, in your advertising or no?
Well, I'm big into making any of I respond to every review we have, good or bad, and I will turn them into commercials. And one of the commercials is for fear-free. So, I had someone be like, oh, they took so long, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, well, funny you mentioned that because that's part of the fear-free process and blah, 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 blah. So, I mean, when you look at where advertising is these days, it's reviews, it's the lateral experiences. So it's not the yellow pages. It's not the sign out front. I mean, that's great. And then it's plastered all over my Instagram. Every other picture either has a fear-free sign or we talk about it because these are the Instagram in any of the social media like that. That's the up and coming, right? So I may be not going to be as interesting to the older generations, but the newer generations, these are their babies. Not saying that the other ones aren't, but definitely when you look at millennials, maybe I don't know about kids, but I've got my Frenchie, and my Frenchie is close to me. Like those are the people I'm speaking to, and so those are the two areas that we, as a younger practice, really pushes in our reviews and then social media.
Well, I can honestly say, as a non-veterinarian and a parent to one of the highest anxiety level dogs on the planet, fear-free means the world to me because she definitely is shaking and terrified the entire time, but it's less than it used to be. But it is terrifying to see them shake so much because you're like, oh, just let me just hold her, and so I do appreciate that Marty brought this to the forefront because I think that it's made a huge difference for pet owners like myself. But I do think that this is a definite topic that needs to be talked about more, and also talking about the challenges with it because it's hard work to get to the end game, right? As we're looking at.
Well, that was so intriguing about us deciding to bring this conversation to the table. Really, right? Was to say what are the challenges. There's so much information out there talking about how fabulous it is. But, as Brian and Jennifer, you guys have mentioned, you don't just decide one day you're going to be fear-free and the next day, boom, it's all done. It's a lot of work and commitment on your part and the part of your staff. So I think that's really important for people to understand what the journey is going to be like. But at the end of that journey, it's going to be so worth it. So you can stay committed to making it happen. It's just, knowing the reality, I think, helps set you up for success, as opposed to having expectations that get dashed.
Absolutely.
You guys are both perfect examples of that.
So does anyone have any final questions other than that? Then what we'll do is we'll do a little parting shot, but you have two amazing experts here. I would offer up, without their permission, that if you have any questions, go and send them to Brenda and myself, and we will get them to these two. We are happy to do so. And then that way, that if you're looking for it, and I, will also be happy to send them on to Fear Free too. They are a tremendous supporter of this conversation. So I want to be sure. I believe Jessica might be on one of the muted lines. But I do want to see, is there any parting questions before we do a parting shot? Boy, you guys are quiet tonight. Usually not this quiet.
And Catherine and I are good at doing a lot of talking, but usually it's not all us.
Well, yeah, it's kind of crazy. So, okay, with that though, for your parting shot for both of you, what is that you want one person, any person to know about your experience? What's the top two things about your experience with converting to Fear Free? And then we will do our final toast. Either one.
I'll let Brian go first.
My fun. Just do it. I'm gonna quote Nike on this one. Just do it. Don't wait. Just make it happen. It's gonna change. It's gonna change your entire clinic experience for everyone that works there. And I think that is one of the keys to the survival. That sounds really the survival of our profession. Like, it's got to get a little easier and happier, and we have to have more wins.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I'll build off of that. I mean, it will change your practice. It changes the way you go about practicing medicine, and you'll never want to go back to the old way. And when you see people going back to the old way, it makes you so upset, and you get so passionate about, like, wait, stop. Let me teach you something or show you something, or it can be done different. You become an advocate for your patients again, which is why we all do this anyway. So.
Oh my gosh, that's fantastic. You guys, with that, I want to thank everyone. So our All Access members will be able to view this video. So we do know that while we had a nice intimate group, we do have a lot of people that will be watching this video. So with that, we want to say thank you to everybody for attending and watching. And for that, thank you both to Dr. Jennifer and Dr. Brian for being here with us. And cheers, everybody.
Cheers.
Cheers. Thank you.
All right, thanks, guys. And